I'm Tom Auvil with the Washington Tree Fruit Research Commission. I work out of Wenatchee. I've been asked by Mike Willett and Richard Kim to participate in the horticultural management of the post-harvest diseases that originate in the orchard, where most diseases start, in Manchurian crabs specifically. Manchurian was selected from 3 other early blooming crabapple types in the early 1980s. We've been seeing where a number of these Manchurians have not been pruned for various reasons. Primarily the thorns on the blooming structures or spurs are very sharp and penetrate tires, four-wheelers, pickups, sprayer tires, tractor tires. And so it's quite a maintenance issue that develops over time. So if you just leave all the wood in the tree, there's none on the ground that the tires hit. Well, when we come to this stage where trees haven't been pruned for several years, there's a couple of diseases that have become very prolific in those undermanaged trees. And the goal is to recognize where the disease is and prune it out. Over 2 years, we've been looking at the pruning of Manchurian crabs, and it became very apparent when we started last year that any structure that was pendant or bore fruit was an indication of where the disease was. When we looked at some younger, more vigorous trees, we noticed that the upright growth in those young trees did not sustain any pressure at all. And so really our goal should be, when we prune these trees, is to minimize the spread, the distance that the tree travels up and down the row or out into the drive row, or the height. That we don't need a big plume of pollen towering over we just need enough bloom so that when the bees work through the upper canopy that they encounter the pollen source and move it through the orchard. We need regular distribution of pollen so that it doesn't need to travel very far, because in cold conditions pollen doesn't move all that far even with reasonable bee activity. So pruning the trees down to a smaller size and having less bloom is not too much of a hazard as far as having enough pollen to set the crop. But if you prune all the disease out of the tree in 1 year, before bloom, there is risk of not having enough pollen that season, and so some diligence needs to be done when we're pruning this to make sure you have adequate pollen for the coming crop. If we're looking to manage the disease and get it out of the field, we really should try to do that before or immediately after bloom. This disease is borne by water, so rain, dew, sprayers, overhead sprinkling all move the disease, especially with wind.